Welcome into another episode of Everything is Logistics, a podcast for the thinkers in freight. I am your host, Blythe Brumleve, and I am happy to welcome in Carly Gunby. She is the Vice President of Sales Strategy and Marketing over at Transfix, and we're going to be talking about that sales and marketing relationship and how it is evolving, especially at a lot of freight brokerages right now, and on the digital front and then on the traditional freight brokerage side of things. So Carly, welcome into the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Now you are a fellow, we were just talking about this. You are a fellow Jacksonville resident. You are also a
Yes.
Jaguars fan.
Yeah.
So you have spent what, about 15 years here in Jacksonville?
Yeah, I think so. It's been about that long. Came over from Tallahassee. But I'm
Oh,
always a native Floridian. Yeah.
so did you go to FSU?
Yeah.
And
Went to
then how did you, so you went to FSU, did you take, logistics courses, I would imagine, over at FSU or
Yeah,
not?
no, that would make sense based on my career, but I actually graduated with a degree in art history. So, yeah, I kind of just fumbled my way into logistics.
Well, tell us a little bit of that backstory. Like, how did you? Because I feel like a lot of people just kind of fall. I fell into logistics working at a 3PL about 10 years ago. So it's kind of one of those industries. As soon as you get in, it's very difficult to leave. And if you
You
try to
never get
leave,
out.
you're going to eventually be pulled back in. So, tell us that story of how you got involved in logistics.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think many people, especially of my age, actually like intentionally went into logistics. I think now that University of North Florida here in Jacksonville has a transportation logistics program, we see more of that. But for me personally, I graduated with an art history degree. I also studied American history. I thought I was going to live this glamorous life being a docent in some fancy museum. But when I graduated, the economy just wasn't supportive of arts and education, and things were tight. And so there was a pretty large transportation company headquartered here in Jacksonville, and I found out that they were hiring for inside sales. And although I knew nothing about it, it was a job fresh out of college. And I reached out to my brother-in-law, who's had a very successful career in business management, and asked him for some sales buzzwords. And he gave them to me, and I convinced them that I knew what I was talking about. And so I started inside sales, and I remember I was selling ocean freight originally. And I remember coming home after the first week and telling my husband, like, they're going to figure me out. I have absolutely no idea what I'm doing.
Oh, wow. So how did you figure it out? What does, I guess, like your first week on the job look like? Is it all cold calling or cold
Yeah.
emailing?
Yeah, so I mean, a lot of it was, understanding first like what the competitive landscape was. The company isn't like an international ocean shipper. It was kind of more niche into the Caribbean and Central America, and so it was just really understanding the trade zones. It was a Jones Act trade, so really understanding what that means, and why we were so supportive of it, and the politics behind it. And so I really just dug in trying to understand it, everything from container sizes to what was important in terms of the commodities and the laws that support them and the taxes. Got into a few shippers who were gracious enough to listen to me, and landed some decent accounts. And from there I was promoted and did outside sales for a while. And then we went into selling more than just ocean freight. Then it was kind of like warehousing and customs brokerage and pull point distribution. So really was exposed to a lot of different points of the supply chain. And then kind of in the last couple of years there, really focused on truck brokerage, which was kind of like another instance of me being like, I have no idea what I'm doing. Truck brokerage is totally different. I remember telling when I got my first opportunity to quote, I remember sending it over to one of the brokers, and was like, do you want to put this in a 40 or a 45? And he was like, that's not how truck brokerage works. Like, they're all 53s. And I was like, oh, okay. Oh, it's not like ocean. Okay, great.
And I think that that's what a lot of people don't really understand. Even if you work, because I worked at a traditional trade broker or truck brokerage company, and there are so many silos within just logistics as a whole. Like, as you're talking about maritime, you're talking about the Jones Act, which is kind of deep into maritime, and then
Hmm.
you have rail, and you have barge shipping, and in addition
Yeah.
to truckload, it's so many different sectors of this industry that you might know nothing about, and you've worked in the industry for 10 years. At least that
Yeah.
was my experience. Did you find that there was a line of business that drew your interest the most, like in any one of those silos?
I mean, I think that for me, I was just constantly learning. Like I was just a sponge in terms of what each of them, like which sectors they supported. I think that was really interesting, but also too, like it is so siloed that very rarely do you have a single decision maker that covered all of them, right? There was either some sort of influencer or domestic is covered here, ocean is covered here. I mean, I think by way of just where my career has landed me, that truck brokerage has obviously kind of stolen my heart and beaten me down, and yet I keep coming back like a crazy ex-girlfriend. Um, but I mean, I've just really kind of fallen to really take to truck brokerage and the markets and understanding them, and I've found my way here.
And that I would imagine that that's a big reason why you chose to eventually join Transfix with their
Yeah.
sales team.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was at a food shippers conference, and I actually was sitting next to somebody who I thought might be a new prospect. I was like, I've been here a couple times. I've never seen you before. Like, I'm going to feel you out. And it ended up being one of the executives from Transfix. And we sat down and had a conversation. I was just completely enamored by what we were doing here. From collecting the data and growing the partnerships and having the technology to really kind of evolve with the shipper and really understand what their needs were, was just so fascinating to me. And I was eager to jump at the opportunity to talk more.
And so for folks who may not be familiar with Transfix, where is sort of their specialty that really drew you in to say, I could really sell this to other shippers and maybe other carriers and folks to come and work for us and work with us?
Yeah, so I mean, when I first started, it was 4 years ago, and it was when digital freight marketplaces were kind of like in the early stages, right? And so for me, that was very exciting, like having the data and analytics to support it and to support the shipper. For us today, we're an intelligent freight platform, and we focus on full truckload, and really partnering with our shippers, like I said before, to better understand what their needs are and to support and create technology that kind of helps them with these obstacles. And so we can do that through just truck brokerage with our intelligent freight platform. We can do it through one of our most recent updates, which is our Transfix True Rate Plus, which is kind of like our evolution of Cost Plus. And then we also have our shipper app. And then we have some really exciting stuff in the pipeline that are still in beta that we're partnering with some shippers on.
And so are you selling to a specific kind of shipper, or a specific commodity, a specific region, or does the Transfix Solutions really offer something for everyone?
Yeah, I mean, I hope that it's something for everyone, right? I mean, we're in the lower 48, and we're not stronger in one region versus the other. I mean, we've really done a great job of growing our cohort with our existing shippers to kind of expand across the U.S. But essentially, if you're shipping full truckload somewhere across the U.S., whether it's dry van or reefer. And I mean, we want to partner with you on that and be in consideration, whether it's, you're kind of in those early stages of growing your company and better understanding your supply chain, or, you're a little bit more sophisticated and on a larger enterprise scale in which we can partner with you.
And so you joined Transfix about 4 years ago. And so when you first get there, are you doing sales? Is that your primary role when you joined them?
Yeah, yeah. So when I joined, when I had left my previous job, I was managing an inside sales team, and it was super rewarding. But I was still kind of hungry for a little bit more. And when I met Transfix, and I had the great pleasure of meeting Drew and Jonathan Salama during my interview process, which are our co-founders, and they're just enigmatic and suck you right in. But yeah, I mean, I started as an individual contributor because I wanted to get back out there. I was hungry for that sale, and so I spent my first probably year and a half, 2 years as an IC before I moved into vice president of sales and managing anyone domiciled like east of the Mississippi, essentially, and those sales reps, and then more recently have gone over sales as a whole.
And so when you are, developing a sales platform or sales program? Because I imagine a lot of your maybe sales planning has changed over the last few years, with I don't want to remind everybody that, that COVID changed the world. But how has, sort of COVID impacted your sales strategy? Because you started there before all of that, but then now we're kind of in the midst of the post-COVID world. So how has your sales strategy started and then evolved since then?
Yeah, I mean, pre-COVID, we were very scrappy. We were very startup, right? Like there weren't territories, we were just kind of like getting out there, getting shippers. It was still very exciting. And then COVID hit and the world was a standstill, right? And so it really gave us the opportunity to look at what our sales strategy was and how we were aligned as an organization. And so what we did is we had our CRMO come in, Rachel Moranis, and we partnered with her on, really creating a sophisticated sales strategy. And that's everything from understanding what is our ICP, like which type of customers derive the most value from us, and how can we continue to partner with like-minded customers? Which ones are we missing out on? What does that look like and why? What are those gaps? What do we have a solution for them? And then it went, even further into understanding like territories and market segmentation and, understanding how do we partner differently with a customer who may have an annual revenue of 500 million versus somebody over $1 billion, and how they operate and how they buy and how we operationalize that.
And so when you, I guess, are coming up with these new initiatives, I would imagine having, because in my previous days, I was kind of the one person marketing team, but also the executive assistant. So I was wearing like all the hats. But then in addition, I'm trying to get the sales team to even adopt like a sales strategy. And this was 10 years ago. So it was still like a lot of like the infighting of like sales versus marketing. Now I feel like those two departments are kind of blended together more so. Is that your experience, working at Transfix, where marketing serves its role, sales serves its role, but they're not enemies anymore? Is that a safe assumption?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, so in how Transfix is situated is that both sales and marketing, all revenue operations roll up under our CRMO. And so there is a very deep partnership that happens there. And it's actually one of the things that we've worked on more so over the last year is making sure we are engaging marketing, right? Like everything from just what type of personas are buying, how they're buying, when they're buying, they're on our calls to hear exactly what shippers want and what resonates and what doesn't. They're helping us in preparing for our QBRs. We have some brilliant people on our team who come up with the most fantastic ideas and that really resonate with shippers. And so it's a really close group that continues to operate. I mean, weekly we have syncs, and whether that's with people that report up to me, to our VPs, it's a very flat organization to make sure that everybody has what they need to support each other.
Love that you said that you sit in on each other's meetings, because that's where I feel like you is the missing like sort of piece to the puzzle where you can gain so much insight. So when you're sitting in on some of these meetings, what have been like some light bulb moments for you that you may not would have gotten just making like an email sequence or like a cold outreach sequence? What are some of those, I guess, light bulb moments from marketing that you've gotten?
I mean, marketing just looks at things through a different lens. I think sales, especially just the innate nature of them, are just like constantly hungry. Sometimes it's a volume game. Sometimes, it's like they're so eager and hungry to like meet somebody and make a connection. They just react, right? And marketing kind of gives us that opportunity to be like, let's understand where they are, what interests them, like how can we personalize this? How can we make this a better touch point so that it's more intentional? I think, I'm kind of struggling for a specific example, but I mean, there are times where the other day I was in a Slack conversation with somebody on my team, one of our content writers, and he talked to both of us and he was like, hey, this sequence, I use it a lot. It has really great kicks, but it's not in my voice. Like I think when someone looks at an email and then talks to me on the phone, they're like, huh, and
that's a good point.
Yeah. And so they're totally open and receptive to make things work. And I think the best thing that comes out of having different stakeholders across is we're very, very receptive and very transparent in being like, what's working, what's not working. And it's not pointing fingers. It's just what isn't working and how do we resolve it? And I think by kind of like having that open forum and everyone being really receptive to it, it helps lead to a really conducive environment.
So what are some of those examples, I guess, of what's working and what's not working right now in sort of the freight brokerage sales world?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's no secret that the market has an abundance of capacity. Tenders are at their highest acceptance levels that they've been in years. And so shippers are, I mean, it feels like to me, and my take on it is like shippers were wrecked during COVID, right? It was what's going to happen. It was nonstop, up all night, trying to figure out where everything is, to now where they can just kind of like take a breath. And so what we're finding now is we're really leveraging our relationships with our shippers, and you know, and we're saying, have we been a good partner to you? Yes, you have, and this is what we really valued. And then we say, well, would you be willing to make an introduction, you know, to this shipper and kind of vouch for that? Because we found that right now, that is really our best foot in the door, is having, you know, somebody other than Transfix say that Transfix is a good partner, right?
Sure.
Listen, you could hear it from me, but like listen to what your peers say. And so we found that to be a really effective strategy.
And so after, I guess, maybe that referral connection is made, is it, you know, someone gets assigned the account in a CRM, or is it, you know, an introductory call that's booked? How do you take that from a referral relationship to an actual like profitable relationship?
Yeah, so our team itself has their own territories, and they have a TAM. They have their total addressable market, which the accounts that they are assigned. And so they are actively looking and seeking ways to find connections and, you know, leveraging their internal resources to say, hey, your person has a connection here. Can you make that connection?
Smart.
So that's kind of like that early stage of it. And then from there, I mean, we have what we call our disco calls, right? Discovery calls, where we're really just trying to better understand where the shippers are. And our goal is to go into those knowing, as like researching and not knowing as much as possible, but having a general idea of what's happening and how things have affected their supply chains, and, you know, up to date on articles and all that fun stuff. So that way we're not doing like I think sales has changed. We're like pre-COVID, it was a deck and here's Transfix and this is new and this is really attractive to you, to now we're saying, here's what we know about your network. Are our assumptions correct? And if they're not, tell us why. And then tell us where you see that partnership and where it lies.
And I think too that with a lot of freight brokerages, especially in the traditional sense, and speaking, you know, from, you know, I guess some of them, not all of them, have to add that caveat. But essentially, the role of a freight broker is they're going to recruit them right out of college. They're going to sit them at a desk, and here is a book of all of these cold leads that we haven't talked to in 6 months or maybe 2 years. Start calling, and that just feels, especially on the marketing side of things, it feels like such an outdated model. But I have heard from so many other different freight brokers that the cold call is not dead. The cold call is their primary way of how they're getting new business. And so is that the same case for you know, y'all over at Transfix, or is it one of those things where it's almost not necessarily a cold call or a cold email because you've already done your research?
I mean, I think it's a little bit of both in a sense. I mean, like, you're doing research so that when you're calling them, you know, it's not just like, hey, tell me about your network, or like, I could be the cheapest guy possible. I mean, like, they're doing the research. But, you know, I just did Q1 reviews with my team, and we were talking about like emails versus calls, and where are you seeing the best strategies, and like, what was your biggest hurdle? How can we overcome it? All that fun stuff. And general consensus is like, the emails have a lot of really great content in it, but we don't, you know, but really it's talking about that content, or if you can get somebody to answer the phone. I think the hardest part is getting somebody to answer a phone in today's day and age, right? But if you can get them there, we're having much more fruitful conversations.
What about from a social media angle? Does social media play any kind of role in sort of your cold or warm outreach?
Yeah, so we've actually had a really big push internally on social media recently, and So our marketing team, who is phenomenal, you know Jenny Ruiz, you've worked with her in the past. So she is kind of like our social extraordinaire. Like she is like just the genius behind all things social for Transfix, and she's really partnered individually with the team to make sure that we have some sort of social presence. I think sometimes, and this is not just my team, I think anybody kind of new into freight or new in the industry kind of has that like fear of messing up, or like, what if I say something and somebody
For
counters it?
sure.
And she's so good at kind of helping them, helping support and craft the message. I mean, we have social selling hours where it's kind of like an open forum where we can come in and we can talk to Jenny, or, the team can say, this is what I've heard is really important to from some of my prospects this week. I want to make a couple posts on it. And so the purpose of that is really so that we are positioning ourselves as a subject matter expert, right? We want people to trust not only the seller, but to trust Transfix, because they have to trust us in order for us to have any sort of partnership.
And you mentioned Jenny a lot because she is such a fantastic podcast host. I was on the Transfix Take podcast, a couple months back, and I was just blown away by her hosting abilities. And now it's been added into my regular rotation of like the industry podcast that I listen to on a regular basis. And so I think she is just such I don't want to say like a hidden talent, but she is very talented, and I think she deserves all the flowers. And so from the speaking of the podcast, from that perspective, you've actually been the sort of a liaison between some of your shipper customers and then getting them on the podcast. How is it difficult to get them to want to be on the podcast, or is it a great selling point, for a lot of them? I imagine it's a little bit of both.
Yeah, no, I think you're exactly right. It is a little bit of both. I think there's that kind of like corporate trepidation in terms of like, can I actually do this? What can I talk about?
The same fears that probably you guys have, am I going to mess up? Am I going to say something wrong?
Absolutely. Yeah. But I mean, I think, so again, to give Jenny all her laurels, she makes the process so easy. We kind of like softball it up. We've had some really, really great podcasts lately, and we have a lot of really good ones that are, about to record soon. But I mean, we've had guests from Unilever, and we've had a professor from Rutgers. I mean, we have a really diverse group of people in our networks that we're able to kind of leverage and say, like, we value your opinion. When I was at RELA a month or so ago, time is a blur. I met so many people who were interested there was a big focus on sustainability. And so there were so many different people there from different walks of sustainability, whether from consulting companies or working for actual enterprise companies. And we've had a ton of great leads from there that were like also lining up to say, like, we would love your take on this. And Jenny's done such a great job. She does a great job researching. She makes it really easy for anybody who wants to be on there. She kind of gives you like a prep document. This is stuff that I saw that's really interesting to you. Are you comfortable talking about it? And then you get these really, like you said, these just really great and engaging conversations. And it's a regular on my podcast too.
Yeah, I cannot speak enough good things about just like her, like hosting chops. Like it is very, I think a lot of companies want to start a podcast, and they kind of go through that learning growth period where they try to get somebody within the office to handle it. But it is an art form. It is a skill, and she absolutely has it. And I think navigating, those different conversations within the freight world is difficult, but she makes it look super easy. And as I kind of, sort of transition to this next topic that I wanted to discuss, because I imagine she deals with it a lot too. And I imagine you deal with it in the same way, but that's being a woman in a male dominated industry, especially in different roles where you're probably leading a team of men. And is that what is I guess, sort of the demographics of, your personal sales team over at Transfix? And then how are you, I guess, sort of getting the best out of them, whether male or female?
Yeah. So my team is actually been expanded more recently. So I am kind of like the full side of revenue now. So I am sales and then the account management side. And so I probably right now I have a lot of direct reports, and I think I probably have 13 to 15 men and 2 women. And so, but that has mostly been my experience
same.
in the industry. I've had I could tell hilarious stories about selling into a group of men, and they would make your jaw drop. But I think in terms of leading a team, I think with the right mindset and approach, you can establish yourself as a respected and effective leader, regardless of what the gender makeup is. I think for me personally, I really just try to, with my team, build relationships, understand, what are their professional goals, what are their personal goals, like how can we kind of enable those. I'm a talker naturally, being in sales, so I'm over communicating. I try to be really transparent. I also try to be really clear on expectations and what our goals are across the org. And I think for me, being a female leader in logistics, one of the best things I have ever done for myself is surround myself with like-minded, effective, strong women leaders. And I've been super fortunate that my very first manager from Crowley is a peer and well-respected friend of mine. I have friends from marketing at Crowley that we've kind of had parallel journeys and leaving and really just growing and being a part of that. So, it's challenging to be a leader in any environment. I think it's just how you establish yourself.
And I think with Transfix in particular, it's almost, I can't exactly go off the exact numbers of female leadership within logistics, but I want to say that Transfix is pretty up there. You got it's female-led company. The CEO, Rachel Moranis, she was on Everything is Logistics back in January. She's the CMO, like I just said, and then of course you and with Jenny as the podcast host. I feel like you guys are you're doing a really good job of putting women in places that it doesn't. They're not there because of their gender. They're there because of their talent. And I think that that's a safe assumption maybe for Transfix.
Absolutely. I mean, we are, the wonderful thing about Transfix is they have always been so supportive of women in this space. And I mean, our leadership as a whole, even like I said, coming back down to our founders, I work day in and day out with Jonathan Salama, and he is a dream to work with. He's so easy and he is open to new ideas, and he's insanely supportive, and of anything that you're working on. He's soft with his criticism. He works to build you, and it helps that my boss is a female badass leading revenue and marketing, and it's great to work for somebody like that, and then to have peers. Our one of our VP of marketing, Amanda Vogel, she's also really phenomenal. So it helps that we're surrounded and the team is built with really great, effective, smart, insanely smart women.
Yeah. And I think too, you had hinted on it, but I think that is such an important piece, is having the male leadership be bought into investing
Totally.
in your women as well, because it's not just, it doesn't have to be like sort of this male versus female sort of fighting for leadership positions. It's really, managing the person first, and then hopefully you're getting the support from upper executives, no matter whether they're female or male. And so I think that that was a really nice touch that you put on there. And so we've talked a little bit about the sales process, the marketing process, and then from a leadership perspective. But then on the flip side, with your carriers and developing those relationships, what does that strategy look like? Separate from your customers, what is that? Is it any kind of a different strategy for working with your carriers?
So full transparency, I mean, I primarily work on our shipper side, but I am very involved on the carrier side and partner with the guys that are over there. Justin Mays also is on a podcast, and he leads the carrier side and the carrier managers. And I think we're all very aware. I mean, we're not naive to the fact that we are nothing without our carriers, right? And so that relationship is crucial to us. And in the same way that we create technology for our shippers in terms of our shipper application, which is kind of like a truckload management system, the data, the analytics, all that stuff that our shippers find value from, we equally balance and invest in our carrier side. And so we're constantly looking at the tools that we have for our carriers. We just did an upgrade to our carrier app that goes beyond what their lane data is, right? We want to understand not only their lane data, but what does their fleets look like? what does their time look like? On what days do they want to work? What days do they not? When do they want to position their fleets, and
Smart.
where do they want to position them? So there's that side of things where we're constantly trying to better understand our carriers. We're trying to grow with them. We've partnered with them in a dedicated model from one of our largest enterprise customers, where they were sourcing for a dedicated solution. They could not find it through some of the offerings that they had with direct assets, and we brought to them and one of our largest carriers. And so we have positioned a majority of their fleet servicing this customer, and that's led to a really great partnership for us as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I imagine the carrier is super stoked about that.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great partnership. And then it's also, I mean, and it lends itself to other opportunities with them, right? Once you build that trust and that rapport, and they say, hey, I can trust you, I can see how you're going to manage my fleet. It's a mutually beneficial partnership. We don't want to undercut them. We need them here in the long term, and so we want to make sure that in the end that they have profitability and sustainability in that. And once you establish that line of trust with them, I mean, it opens us up to a whole other side of their operations and, fleet and regional areas that we didn't have with them previously, which again comes to the other side of like the freight ecosphere, which allows us to be a better partner to our shippers.
And so you had just touched on briefly about, some of the tech upgrades that Transfix has made. Where do you see, I guess, sort of the role of a traditional freight brokerage? Do you think that most of these freight brokerages are going to have to kind of move into the digital model, or do you see it playing out really for both, that both can still operate, in those separate markets, if that makes sense?
I mean, this is a multi-billion-dollar industry, I think, and competition is healthy. I'm always a fan of it. I'm naturally very competitive. But I mean, I think that there's still a need for that traditional broker, especially when they're regionalized. I mean, we've heard it from shippers, especially, like they're going to keep this broker in this area because this is where their niche is and where their trucks are. And that's where they find value. And whether it's through on-time service and hitting KPIs or through price. And so I think that we can both kind of operate cohesively. I think that there's two very different offerings in what we have.
And so when you are, I guess, when we're talking about like Transfix as the companies in particular, what other, kind of tech advancements are you guys investing in? Are you guys, kind of playing around with any of like the AI tools or like ChatGPT or anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, on the sales side, we're definitely looking into ChatGPT and playing with it. I think for us right now, we're kind of toying with it. It's a really great tool to prepare for a meeting, right? Like
Yes.
it's if you can find the right way to manipulate the prompts, I mean, it's just crazy. I sound like such an old lady, but like the tech is just insane.
No, I mean, I've been asking all of these I've had probably, a half a dozen interviews over the last week and talking to different freight companies, and all of them, there's not one that hasn't said that they're not trying to figure out a way to use AI in their business. And ChatGPT, I think, is at the front of that. There's all these other tools that are sort of being built on top of it. But that's
Sure.
interesting. You mentioned that, from the research angle.
Yeah.
What other kind of use cases are you using ChatGPT for? Like I've used it to like write emails for me or to help me condense an email into a
Yeah.
shorter email. That's helped a ton.
Yeah, so I mean, it just kind of depends. Like each sales rep uses it uniquely. Kind of like I've coached them in terms of like find where your deficit is and like leverage Chat GPT there. So there was like one
Smart.
where if we were kind of having if a shipper said, hey, we're going to do this, and then they pulled back and said, you know what, I don't think we are, and like the sales rep wanted to be like, what do you mean? Like what change? Like, and I was like, why don't you put a prompt in there about what is a soft way to say, hey, I thought we were on the same page. Can you help me understand where you have a disconnect? And so we use it for stuff like that to kind of help them like better manage that if they have to like soften any language. If like also too, it's really helpful in terms of like looking at a company overall and like a prospect in and of itself and being like, hey, this person is interested in these three things. Are there recent events in which I could use as an icebreaker? And like that has helped in terms of
Love it.
opening the conversation up. So, I mean, it could be used in a in many, many different ways. We're experimenting internally. Our sales enablement team is kind of like researching and playing with a couple different prompts and seeing where we can get some connectivity directly into our sales enablement tools.
Yeah, it is fascinating to start seeing how companies are using, a ChatGPT like function on top of their own data. I think that is just so it unlocks so many things, especially from a marketing standpoint, because then you have so much more insight as to what's working and what isn't. I remember, just even trying to get, some kind of insight from our TMS, 10 years ago, and all I could get was just the ability to export names and email addresses. That's all I had. And now it's like the world is at your fingertips. Like, it's crazy.
Yeah, yeah, I totally get it. I mean, when you talk about that kind of like having the world at your fingertips, that was like one of the best things about Transfix when I first came here was I was at a traditional brokerage and we operated through like a functional TMS for the carrier side. But like, I remember coming here and just being like, do you guys know what you have at your fingertips? Like this data is just like in this report. Like, this is just so hard to pull. Like, it's such a manual process at other places. The fact that you not only have it, you can send it on whatever cadence fits your needs and the shipper's needs, and you can like compare it. And as it's just really incredible when you take a step back and think about where we are as an industry, and especially with what's happened in the last couple of years and how we're kind of like coming out of the fog.
Yeah, 100%. And so if you are, in the coming months, I guess, what can folks sort of expect? Is there any new, I guess, maybe products or maybe new podcasts coming? I imagine maybe both aspects within the Transfix platform. And then also on the podcast front, what are some updates that maybe folks can look forward to from Transfix?
Yeah, I mean, on the podcast front, Jenny always has the most engaging, like just incredible podcast guests on there. And there's like a whole breadth of guests who are on there. So I would always keep track of what's coming there. If you haven't, like I said, look backwards into some of them. Those are really great. I think our focus right now for Transfix is, not long ago, we just unveiled True Rate Plus, and that is just, we think it's just such a great tool to better understand the market. It gives you transparency. It kind of shares in the pay and gain model. It's really kind of sharing that transparency and giving you, the shipper, what they need to understand what's happening in markets. It helps better manage costs. And then, I mean, we're constantly investing in our shipper app and providing updates. And then we have some other tools that are in beta that will be announced really soon, but are very exciting. And I'm naturally like, I'm in love with them, and I think they're going to change the world.
Yeah, 100%. Because I mean that is it. Seeing the technology revolution come into logistics has been so wild to see. And then you have on the other side of the coin, you have all of these different sales and marketing tools that are just sort of coming into their own, and then add on AI and ChatGPT and all of these other tools on top of it. It just finally feels like we're getting to a place where marketing and sales and executive leadership can kind of all use all of these tools together in order to make our jobs better.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, Carly, where can folks, follow more of your work, follow Transfix, all of that good stuff?
Yeah, so you can find Transfix at transfix.io. For me personally, you can find me on LinkedIn. It's linkedin.com/Carly Gunby. Happy to connect with anybody and talk freight at any time.
Absolutely. Well, it was a great conversation with you, Carly, and thank you for dropping all those gems, especially when it comes to is the cold calling or cold emailing dead? I'm pretty sure you just need a little help from ChatGPT to help you hone in on those messages and not react emotionally to other messages, which is something that I've used as well. So Carly, thank you again for coming on the show, and I will link to the Transfix Take podcast in the show notes, just so, because we mentioned Jenny, I think like 12 times during this episode. So folks can go check out her great work as well, and also link to your LinkedIn and the Transfix website as well. So Carly, again, thank you. And
it's been my pleasure.
Absolutely. And go Jags. I can finally say that,
Duval.
We talked about that initially. If hopefully you are the first one to leave a Duval on the show. So thank you for that.
Yes, absolutely.
Heck yeah. Awesome, Carly.